The line in the stars burned cold and endless. And in that endless dark, the war began. The Galactic Council had met in fear, their chambers filled with voices that trembled. Their worlds were falling one by one to the advancing Zyran Empire, a race that knew no mercy. Every species had the same plan: retreat, survive, wait for a chance to hide. But one voice among them did not agree: humanity. The humans had arrived late to the stars compared to the older species, yet in only a few centuries they had spread like fire through the void, building fleets, colonies, and weapons that unsettled their neighbors. Now, when the enemy came, the galaxy expected humanity to act the same as everyone else, to fall back, to bend the knee, to retreat. But humanity said no. Admiral Kalen of the United Terran Fleet stood at the edge of the Orion sector, the last safe passage before the enemy reached the inner colonies. Behind him were hundreds of refugee ships from other races, crammed with frightened civilians. Before him stretched the black gulf of space, and beyond that gulf burned the fire of the enemy's war fleets. He gave a simple order, one that would become legend: not one step back. The Council screamed betrayal. They begged humanity not to resist. They warned that defiance would bring annihilation. But the humans had already drawn their line, their fleets positioned in silence, like wolves waiting in the dark. The first hook came with the silence itself. A Zyran armada expected fear, expected signals of surrender, expected the humans to scatter. Instead, they found stillness, ships unmoving, weapons locked on target, engines glowing with power but not shifting. It was the kind of silence that carried weight, the kind of silence that told the enemy something was deeply wrong. When the Zyran commander gave the order to attack, the void exploded in fire. Alien cruisers stormed forward, their cannons ripping into human shields, explosions flaring across the black. But the humans did not break formation. They held there, lying like stone walls in the sky. Each human ship answered not with retreat, but with concentrated volleys, their railguns cutting through Zyran armor. The galaxy had expected humans to run, but instead they watched humans fight with the precision of executioners. Kalen stood on the bridge of his flagship Iron Resolve, his eyes fixed on the burning void. His crew worked in silence. No panic, no hesitation. Every soldier knew what was at stake. This was not just another battle. This was the wall, and if it fell, humanity would fall with it, so they would not let it fall. Suspense filled the airwaves. Other races intercepted the battle transmissions. They could not believe what they saw. World after world had been abandoned before the Zyrans, but here were humans refusing to move an inch. The counselors whispered in fear. They will be destroyed. They must retreat. But deep inside, even the most cowardly species felt a strange stirring hope. The battle grew worse with every hour. Zyran destroyers smashed into human lines, kamikaze strikes tearing chunks from cruisers. Human ships burned. Crews screamed over broken combs. Lifeboats floated in the dark. Yet for every human ship that died, 2 Zyran ships followed it into silence. The silence again, it terrified the enemy. Humans did not wail, did not broadcast pleas. They fought until their ships became wrecks. And then even those wrecks fired their last rounds before drifting into the dark. The Zyrans began to hesitate, their advance slowing, their confidence cracking. It was then Kalen spoke again. If they want this passage, they will pay for it with rivers of fire. The words were carried on every open channel. The galaxy listened, trembling, as humanity declared their defiance. And in that moment, the war changed. Not in numbers or weapons, but in spirit. For the first time in centuries, the invincible Zyran Empire felt something they had never felt before. Fear and humanity, standing on the line in the stars, refused to move back. Asterisk the first shock. The wreckage of the first battle drifted in silence. Twisted metal and shattered hulls floating like broken bones among the stars. The humans had not retreated, but neither had the enemy been defeated. The Zyran Empire returned with more ships, larger ships, weapons designed to erase hope itself. The galaxy watched, expecting the human line to finally break. Even the Council whispered that humanity had bought enough time, that surely they would withdraw now. But the humans did not move. The fleets were reforged, fresh ships brought from Earth's shipyards, scarred vessels repaired in orbit above burning colonies. And at the heart of it all stood Admiral Kalen. Unshaken, this time, the Zyrans unleashed their strength at once. Thousands of ships in a single formation, their black-armored cruisers blotting out the stars. The sight alone was enough to make smaller species send surrender messages before a shot was fired. But the humans sent nothing, no retreat signal, no cry for peace, only silence. The hook came again with that silence. The enemy was unnerved, for silence meant certainty. Silence meant resolve. Silence meant death. The first wave struck the Terran fleet with overwhelming fire. Blasts of plasma ripped apart human destroyers. Carriers buckled and broke. Bodies and lifeboats scattered into the void. The enemy expected the rest to flee, but the humans pressed forward, closing the distance, turning what should have been defense into attack. Cullen's voice carried across the fleet, calm and cold. For every ship we lose, they lose too. No one breaks the line, not one step back. And his fleet answered, not with cheers, but with action. Railguns roared, missiles streaked like fire across the black. Laser batteries cut through enemy shields. The Zyrans had expected desperation, but what they met was calculation. Human ships rammed into enemy cruisers, crews willing to die if it meant taking more foes with them. Wounded vessels refused to abandon the line, burning but still firing. One ship, the Defiance, had its entire front section torn away, yet its gunners stayed at their stations in open vacuum, firing until their lungs froze. The galaxy had never seen such a thing. Warriors fighting after their ship was already a corpse. The suspense grew as reports spread across neutral systems. Merchants whispered, refugees wept, and even soldiers of other empires could not believe what they heard. Humans fight as if death is nothing, as if pain does not exist. But the truth was simpler. Humans had decided that retreat was worse than death. The Zyran commander hesitated. It was only a moment, but in that moment, the humans struck hard. A hidden wing of Terran battleships warped in from the far side of the system, cutting into the Zyran rear. Suddenly, the hunters became the hunted, surrounded by enemies who should have been too weak to stand. Kalen gave one final order in that battle, words that carried across every channel. They think they bring us fear. Show them what fear really means. And the Terran fleet answered with brutal precision, ships converging on targets, hammering them into pieces. The Zyrans were forced to fall back, leaving behind wreckage, leaving behind silence. The shock was not just in the enemy's retreat. It was in the galaxy's realization. For the first time, the unstoppable empire had been slowed, not by a miracle weapon, not by numbers, but by will. The will of a species that refused to retreat. Whispers grew louder across the stars. Alien leaders asked themselves dangerous questions. If humans fight like this for themselves, what will they do if we fight beside them? The Council grew restless, torn between fear of humanity and the strange hope they inspired. But in the void, there was no debate. Only steel, blood, and fire. Human ships drifted, broken but unyielding, their crews either dead or standing ready. For the next wave, Kalen stood on the bridge of the Iron Resolve, eyes burning with cold fire. He knew this was only the beginning, the first true shock. The enemy would return with even greater fury, but humanity would be waiting, silent and unbroken, and somewhere deep in the shadows of the galaxy. In places the Zyrans once ruled without question, the first spark of rebellion flickered. The galaxy had witnessed something impossible. An impossibility was contagious. The first shock had come. The galaxy would never be the same. Asterisk. The human oath. The galaxy had gone quiet. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of disbelief. The Zarin Empire had been slowed, forced to fall back, if only for a moment. And it was the humans who had done it. Across 1,000 worlds, refugees watched shaky transmissions of the battles, their eyes wide, their voices whispering the same words. They did not retreat. Species that had fled for generations could not understand it. They had always chosen survival, always chosen to run. But the humans had chosen to stand. In the council chambers, arguments broke into chaos. The elder races shouted that humanity was reckless, foolish, doomed. But others whispered that perhaps this defiance was not madness. Perhaps it was strength. Still, no one could deny the truth. The humans had drawn a line and refused to step back. It was then that Admiral Kalen spoke. His words carried not just to his fleet, but broadcast across open channels, reaching the ears of every listening world. His voice was calm, yet it carried iron. We will not retreat, not one step back. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. The words became more than an order. They became an oath. The hook came with the power of that oath. For the first time, the galaxy saw not just soldiers, but a people united in defiance. And in that defiance was something terrifying, something unbreakable. On the burning colony of Terith, survivors huddled inside ruined shelters, listening to the oath play over cracked speakers. Children raised their heads, mothers wept, fathers clenched their fists. They had lost everything. Yet, when they heard the human words, a spark lit in their hearts. If humans would not retreat, then maybe they did not have to either. The Zyrins prepared their next move. They were not used to hesitation, not used to fear, but the humans had forced both upon them to crush this resistance. The Empire built new weapons, planet killers forged to erase entire worlds in fire. The plan was simple: break the human spirit with horror so deep that even they would flee. But humanity had already answered. Kalen met with the War Council of Earth, his eyes burning with resolve. The room was filled with tired commanders, leaders with scars, soldiers who had seen too much death. Yet when Kalen spoke the words, they all answered as one: we will not retreat. Suspense grew as the oath spread further. Merchants carried it between stars. Smugglers whispered it in dark alleys. Even slaves in the deepest Zerine mines spoke it in the night. The Empire tried to laugh at it, tried to dismiss it, but in their laughter there was unease, for they had seen what the oath meant in battle. Ships that fought until nothing was left. Crews who refused surrender. A fleet that turned silence into terror. And now the oath was no longer just human. It was becoming something larger. In the next great clash, the Zyrins brought their new terror, a weapon designed to shatter entire continents in seconds, a weapon that burned the surface of a world into glass. The humans did not back down. Instead, they swore the oath again. Their voices carried across the stars. Not one step back. The battle was chaos, fire tearing through the void, worlds burning, fleets shattering, but every time the Zyrins expected humans to break. They held. Every time they expected fear, they met silence. And when the dust cleared, even though human losses were heavy, the line had not moved. The suspense now lay not in the battles themselves, but in the question whispered by every species that watched. What kind of people refused to flee, even when their worlds burn? The answer was simple: a people who had made an oath. In hidden corners of the galaxy, resistance began. Small groups of aliens who had once been conquered rose in secret, armed with stolen weapons, fighting with courage they never knew they had. And on their walls, painted in human letters, they wrote the words, "Not one step back." The oath was spreading faster than fire. And the Zyrins, for the first time in their history, feared words more than weapons. Admiral Kalen stood again on the bridge of the Iron Resolve. His fleet battered, his soldiers weary, yet his eyes burned with the same fire as before. He knew the war was only beginning, that greater horrors waited ahead. But he also knew that humanity had already won something greater than any single battle. They had won the galaxy's attention. They had won its fear, and perhaps they had won its hope. The oath had been spoken, and the galaxy would never forget it. Asterisk fire in the void. The galaxy thought it had seen horror. Worlds had burned before. Empires had risen and fallen, yet nothing prepared them for what the Xyrans brought next. It was no longer war. It was punishment. From the dark shipyards of the Empire came new machines. Planet killers the size of moons. Weapons forged only to erase life. They did not come to conquer. They came to scorch, to wipe entire colonies from memory. The message was clear: if humanity would not retreat, then humanity would be made an example. The first victim was Cora Prime, a world of silver oceans and green mountains. Home to millions, the Xyrans unleashed their weapon. And in a single burning storm, the seas boiled, the land turned black, and the sky itself caught fire. Transmissions of the horror raced across the stars, desperate voices crying before they were silenced forever. The galaxy shuddered. Surely this would break the humans. Surely this would finally make them run. But humanity did not run. Admiral Kalen stood before the fleet, his face lined with firelight from the burning world, his voice cold as steel. They think this fire will frighten us, but it only lights our path forward. We do not retreat, not now, not ever. The hook came in that defiance. Where every other race would have bent, humanity stiffened. Where every other empire would have wept, humanity sharpened their blades. In hidden shipyards across the Sol system, the Terrans forged their answer. Not weapons to burn planets, but weapons to break empires. Railgun moons, entire celestial bodies, turned into cannons that could hurl slugs faster than light. Fleets outfitted with engines that burned hotter than suns. Crews trained not to survive, but to endure. The next battle came in the shadow of a dying star. The Xyrans unleashed their planet killers, believing they could erase humanity with one strike. But humanity had learned their tactics, and Kalen was waiting. The Terran fleet surged forward, not away from the fire, but into it. Suspense filled the void as the humans closed the distance, their ships burning under plasma storms, their hulls melting, yet they pushed on, one by one. Xyran weapons were struck by railgun fire, shells slamming into armored cores, tearing apart engines the size of cities. Explosions flared like dying suns, the void itself shaking under the roar of destruction. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Kalen watched as one of his own battleships was swallowed whole by a Xyran beam. The ship burned, the crew screamed, but even as it disintegrated, its last missiles fired, striking and crippling a planet killer. The galaxy watched, stunned. Even in death, humans fought. One ship became a legend that day, the Vigilant Dawn. When its engines failed and its shields collapsed, the captain did not order retreat. Instead, he rammed the ship into the side of a Xyran fortress, detonating its core, the explosion tearing through the void like a second star. The crew's last transmission carried one line: "Not one step back." The suspense tightened, because this was no longer only war, it was transformation. The humans were teaching the galaxy something terrifying, that destruction did not end them, it only sharpened them. And if the Xyrans thought fire would crush them, then they had only fed the blaze. Whispers spread across conquered worlds. Slaves in chains spoke the oath at night. Rebels painted human words on ruined walls, and in the hearts of the Xyrans themselves, doubt began to fester. If even planet killers could not bend the Terrans, what would? The battle ended in silence once more. Wreckage drifted among the stars, flames glowing like dying lanterns in the void. Both sides bled, both sides burned, but humanity still stood. Kalen gave the order to regroup, his voice steady. "They brought fire to break us. We will show them that we are the fire. The words traveled again, carried on every channel, repeated in every corner of the galaxy, and the council, who once mocked humanity, now sat in fear. For they realized the truth. The Xyrans had not shown humans fear. Humans had shown the galaxy what fear truly was. The void burned that day, but the humans did not. Instead, they carved their oath deeper into history. Not one step back. Asterisk. Fear in the enemy's eyes. The wreckage of war drifted like ash across the void. Human ships burned, Xyran ships shattered, and still the line held. For every weapon the Empire forged, humanity answered with defiance. And now something had changed. The fear no longer belonged only to the galaxy. It belonged to the Xyrans. The once mighty empire that had crushed 100 worlds without pause now felt hesitation. Commanders who once barked orders with arrogance now glanced at the stars as if expecting shadows to move. For in every clash, the humans refused to yield. In every battle, they made silence their answer. And in silence, fear grew. Suspense came. When the Xyrans launched their newest offensive, a fleet of black-armored dreadnoughts, weapons heavy enough to tear moons apart, they expected terror to break human morale. But when their ships arrived at the edge of the Sol system, they found Terran fleets already waiting. No retreat, no scattered formation, just rows of steel in the darkness. Kalen stood at the center of it all, his voice steady across the combs. They think we will falter. They think we will run. Today, we show them what they truly fear. The oath returned, carried again by every soldier. Every ship, not one step back. The first shock came not from human weapons, but from human silence. The Xyran dreadnoughts opened fire, beams lashing across the void, tearing through destroyers and cruisers. But even as ships burned, the humans did not cry out. Their fleets advanced slowly, steadily, as if death meant nothing, and that steady march was more terrifying than any scream. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Kellen's officers reported casualty after casualty. Entire wings of fighters erased, frigates torn apart, carriers falling into pieces. But the Admiral's eyes never wavered. Every loss was fuel, every sacrifice a step closer. The suspense deepened as the humans revealed their hidden hand from the far side of the system. Shadows appeared in entire fleet that had vanished weeks ago. The galaxy had whispered about it. Refugees spoke of human ships disappearing behind. Enemy lines. Now they returned, not scattered or broken, but ready. They struck the rear of the Xyran dreadnoughts with railguns and missiles. The ambush cutting deep. The enemy panicked. For the first time in their long history, Xyran crews broke discipline. They shouted in fear, some abandoning positions, others firing wildly into the void. They had never faced an enemy who fought like this, who turned death into a weapon, a cross. The galaxy, alien eyes widened. Leaders who once mocked humans now watched the Empire tremble. Whispers spread. If humans fight like this for themselves, what will they do if we fight beside them? The fear was not just in the Xyrans anymore. It was in every throne room, every council chamber. Because if the humans refused to retreat, then siding against them could be just as dangerous as facing them. The battle raged on. Human ships battered. Xyran fleets bleeding. One by one, dreadnoughts fell. Their wrecks torn apart by coordinated strikes. The humans gave no quarter, no mercy. Every strike was cold, efficient, terrifying, and soon the dreadnought line cracked. Kellen's final order echoed like thunder. Advance, no retreat, no hesitation. Fear is theirs, not ours, and the Terran fleet surged forward, ships burning but unbroken. The Xyrans fell back, their once proud armada fleeing before an enemy they once called weak. The suspense did not end with the battle. It grew stronger, because the galaxy now knew the truth. The Xyrans were not invincible. The humans had carved fear into their hearts. In hidden corners of conquered space, rebels struck harder. Chains were broken, banners raised, and always the same words painted in human letters. Not one step back. And in Siren command halls, where once confidence had ruled, silence and dread now lingered. On the iron resolve, Kalen looked out over the drifting wreckage. He did not smile, he did not celebrate, for he knew this was only the beginning. The Empire would strike back, harder than ever before. But the humans had already won something greater than victory. They had placed fear into the eyes of the enemy, and once fear takes root, it never leaves. Asterisk the turning point. The Zyrans had tasted something new: fear. They had ruled for centuries with iron claws and fire, but now their fleets hesitated, their commanders doubted, their soldiers whispered of humans in the dark. The Empire still had numbers, still had weapons, but confidence was slipping, and Kalen knew this was the moment to strike. The Terran High Command met in a war council orbiting Mars. Admirals, generals, and leaders stood around a glowing map of the galaxy, red with enemy territory, blue with human lines, and countless gray zones where refugees hid. The enemy was stronger in every way. Yet Kalen pointed to the heart of their empire, the enemy capital itself. They expect us to defend. They expect us to hold the line. Instead, we will break. Theirs, the galaxy would have called it madness, to strike so deep behind enemy lines, to risk everything on one daring move. But madness had already become humanity's greatest weapon, and so the plan was set: an entire fleet would vanish, slipping through forgotten wormholes, shadows in the void, their destination the enemy's heart. Suspense built as rumors spread. Alien traders whispered of human ships disappearing from known sectors. Ziran spies reported gaps in Terran defenses. The Empire prepared to crush what they believed was weakness. But in truth, those empty lines were bait. Weeks passed, battles raged, human forces bleeding but still unbroken. And then, on a silent night in the enemy capital system, alarms screamed across their skies. Human ships emerged from the void, their steel hulls scarred, their weapons glowing. They had bypassed 1,000 defenses, traveled through forgotten paths, and now stood at the gates of the Empire's throne. The hook came when the enemy realized the truth. Humanity was not simply refusing to retreat, they were advancing. And not just anywhere, but into the very heart of the Ziran Empire. The fleet struck with fury. Railguns tore through orbital fortresses. Missiles broke apart defense grids, and fighters swarmed across the sky like angry sparks. For the first time in living memory, the Ziran capital itself shook with war. Civilians screamed, soldiers panicked, and the Empire's rulers stared in disbelief at the impossible. Humans had brought the war to their doorstep. Kellen's voice carried across every channel, cold and sharp as iron. You thought we would run. You thought fear was yours to command. Now look into your own heart and see what you've created. The suspense tightened as the Zyrans threw everything they had into the fight. Dreadnoughts swarmed the human fleet, colossal ships firing beams that tore through the void. Yet the Terrans fought like predators. Every loss turned into a strike, every burning wreck into a trap. One ship, the Steel Horizon, crippled and burning, detonated its core in the middle of the enemy formation, tearing apart a dozen Ziran ships in a single flash. The galaxy watched in awe as transmissions leaked across space. Every race, every refugee, every rebel saw the capital of the greatest empire burn under human fire. And they whispered the same words again and again. Not one step back. The battle did not end in a clean victory. Human losses were staggering. Entire wings of the fleet destroyed. Countless lives given in fire. But it was not defeat, because the humans had proven the unthinkable, that the Empire could be struck, that no world was safe from their defiance. The Ziran Emperor sat in silence upon his throne. For the first time in his reign, he saw the shadow of fear in his own halls. His commanders avoided his gaze, his soldiers trembled. The humans had done what no empire, no rebellion, no rival had ever achieved. They had shaken the heart of the beast on the iron resolve. Kalen stood weary but unbowed. His fleet crippled, his crews bloodied, yet his voice remained steel. They thought the fire would consume us, but we are the fire, and now the galaxy knows it. Suspense lingered in every corner of the stars, because this was more than a battle, more than a raid. It was the turning point. The day the galaxy realized the impossible could be done. The day the Empire's mask of invincibility cracked. And the day the humans claimed not just survival, but the power to change the fate of the stars, asterisk. The day the galaxy learned fear. The smoke of war still hung over the enemy capital. Ships burned in orbit. Cities trembled under falling wreckage. And yet the humans had not retreated. Even broken, even bloodied, they held their ground. And the galaxy held its breath. The Zyran Empire was shaken to its core. The Emperor sat in silence, staring at his throne room walls as if they could protect him from the truth. His fleets had been battered, his pride wounded, his aura of invincibility shattered. And all of it had been done by the one species every elder race once mocked as fragile, reckless, and unworthy, humanity across the stars. The transmission spread. Rebels in distant colonies rose from the shadows. Slaves threw chains aside. Conquered worlds dared to whisper of freedom, for they had seen what the humans had done. They had not just fought the Empire, they had forced it to bleed. Admiral Kalen stood aboard the Iron Resolve, its hull cracked, its decks scarred, but still alive. His voice carried not just to his fleet, but across every open channel of the galaxy. We will never retreat, we will never bow, if you bring war to us. We will bring it back tenfold, and if you call us weak, remember this day. The hook came in those words. They were not a speech for victory, but a warning. A promise etched into history. The galaxy trembled. For the first time, they did not look at humanity as newcomers or rivals, but as something else entirely. A people who had transformed defiance into a weapon sharper than any blade. The Zyrans prepared for another strike. But when their fleets gathered, their captains hesitated. Whispers passed through their ranks. What if the humans are waiting? What if they never stop? What if we are already beaten? Fear had taken root, and once it grows, it never leaves. Suspense grew as rebel worlds lit their skies with fire. On the mining planet Dravos, slaves overthrew their masters, painting human words on the walls of their barracks. Not one step back. On the ocean world of Celeris, hidden fighters surfaced and struck at patrol ships, their rallying cry the same oath. Even races that once feared humans began to see them as protectors, allies, maybe even saviors. But humanity did not. Celebrate. Kalen walked the shattered bridge, stepping over broken steel and the names of the dead carved into bulkheads by surviving crew. His soldiers did not cheer. They stood silent, their eyes hard, for they knew the war was far from over. They had struck fear into the enemy. Yes, but fear breeds desperation, and desperate enemies can be the most dangerous. Yet the galaxy had already changed. The Zyran Empire would never again be untouchable. Every world they ruled now dreamed of freedom. Every soldier they commanded now carried doubt. And all of it had begun because one species refused to take a single step backward. On Earth, the broadcast replayed again and again. Families crowded. Bunkers listened in silence. Children repeated the oath in whispers before sleep. Not one step back. It was no longer just a military command. It was the soul of a people. The suspense lingered as the war entered a new phase. The humans had proven they could wound the Empire. Now the question hung in every star system. Would they destroy it? And if they did, what would rise in its place? Kalen stood before his officers, his voice steady, though his body carried exhaustion. The galaxy has seen what happens when we refuse to retreat. Now let them decide if they will stand with us or against us. The words were not arrogance. They were truth. For the galaxy had seen enough to know that fighting against humanity was no longer just war. It was suicide. The day ended not with victory parades, not with songs. It ended with silence, the silence of the enemy's retreat, the silence of rebels rising, the silence of a galaxy that finally understood. Humans were not dangerous because of their weapons, not because of their fleets, not because of their numbers. They were dangerous because of their will, because they refused to break, refused to bow, refused to retreat. And on that day, the galaxy learned fear. Not the fear of the Zyran Empire, but the fear of what humanity truly was. A fire that would never die. A line in the stars that no one could cross. Asterisk.